You are now listening to the E-Watchman Podcast with your host, Robert King.
Hello, everyone. This is my first podcast of the new year, 2021. In fact, it's my first podcast in quite a few months, although I've done a number of YouTube videos. You know, as Jehovah's Watchman, I've tried to watch the comings and goings in the world to see exactly where we are, in the stream of time as to the outworking of Jehovah's purpose. The Watchtower claims to be that watchman, and it is always fixated on the date 1914. And they've tied so much prophecy to it. It really doesn't give us an accurate measure of where we are. And we've been in the time of the end for over 100 years. And a few years ago, the Watchtower took to saying we're deep into the time of the end. We're getting deeper all the time. But there's a lot wrong with that. And that's not going to be the focus of this program. But I've written a number of articles, of course, about Donald Trump. And I think with his presidency, we saw such a ferocious backlash against him. In fact, the whole 4 years of his presidency was one big effort to get rid of him. Not on the part of the people, but on the part of the so-called establishment, the deep state. And really, if you looked hard enough, you could see that it was emanating from the City of London, from what I call the British Empire. Others call it the globalists, or whatever. But it is powerful banking interests, primarily. And for various political reasons, primarily, in Trump's campaign speech, he said, "What's wrong with friendly relations with China and Russia?" And that was like, words of war to these one-worlders that want to conquer the world and make it safe for, the British, Anglo-American, whatever. So, and the other thing Donald Trump did was to remove the United States from the Paris Climate Accord. And that, of course, was an agreement to reduce greenhouse gas, whatever, which basically involves more deindustrialization, which has been ongoing process anyway for the past 50 years. But now they want to, go for broke to just shut down industry. And of course, it would eventually, ultimately result in food shortages and reducing the capacity of civilization to support the billions of people that are now alive. So it's sort of a backhanded way of getting the nations to agree to commit genocide without the bombs and bullets and all that mess. So Trump was against that. And now this new Green Deal is really going for it. The banks have all agreed, starting with the Bank of England, not surprisingly, no funding, no credit to businesses that, are putting out too much carbon dioxide. And Trump was standing in the way of that. So it looks like they got rid of him. But, I was expecting, obviously, there was a lot of election fraud. It was way over the top. And I won't even go into that, but it's a lot of it's out there, even though now the big media giants have made it illegal, really, to even speak about such things as election fraud. You can't speak about that. You'll be silenced on their platform. Yeah. So anyway, I was expecting Donald Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, which would essentially place the United States under military control and allow the president to take over the job of the Attorney General and to have people arrested for sedition and treason and they wouldn't place them in the local jail because it would be a military operation. They would take them to some black site like Guantanamo Bay. There were rumors that I was following after the election that special forces raided a compound, actually the U.S. Embassy in Germany in Frankfurt, raided it, and there was a firefight, in fact, and 5 forces were killed. We don't know whether they're all special forces or the other side. The CIA had their Dominion computer there, and actually the head of the CIA was there, Gina Haspel, and the rumors were flying she'd been wounded and taken off, and was explaining how this whole deep state worked. Well, the CIA, of course, denied it. She's fine, she's here, but she hasn't been seen in public. So I was expecting something to come down from that. It's amazing that, during this whole seditious thing, going back to the Russiagate, these phony, accusations, the impeachment and all of that, the FBI spying on Trump, not one person has been arrested. So that tells you the FBI, the CIA, they're all against protecting their own, obviously, to overthrow a duly elected president of the United States. And the courts of the land have had an opportunity to stand up. I mean, this is America is the bastion of democracy, right? The cradle of democracy, the champion of freedom. Well, not one government institution has stood up, won't even listen to the arguments, the evidence. And the mainstream media, which they've revealed themselves now, for sure, as mere mouthpieces of the CIA and England's MI6. They say there's no evidence. There's no evidence of voter fraud, even though many eyewitnesses have signed affidavits testifying to what they've seen, which would mean that if they're lying, they go to jail. So anyway, I was expecting, I was hoping to get a bearing on where we are, because I thought if Trump would evoke the Insurrection Act, that would be the pushback. I know somebody, Brother Joel on my site, has commented that he thinks the pushing has already begun, that has been going on during Trump's presidency. And I appreciate that. I mean, in a way I can see it. But, it appears to me that, Trump or the USA that he represents has not really pushed back. Donald Trump has been like, a prize fighter. It's been in the corner doing the rope-a-dope, getting pummeled. He's been taking their blows. They haven't knocked him out, but he hasn't inflicted too many blows, any that I can see. In other words, he hasn't pushed back. And, I got to say I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping, it's like we're on a vast sea in a sailing ship and the blackness of night, and you have to have a star to navigate by. And I thought if this pushing would evoke, the King of the North's reaction to flood over, then we'd know where we stand, that the time of the end has begun. That would be the most profound thing. Because I know, and I know many of you know, and some of you may be kind of like thinking this through and suspecting that 1914 is a fraud. I can assure you that it is, that Christ Jesus has not begun ruling, that the Son of Man has not arrived, but he's coming. It's interesting, when Jesus was in his ministry, he had performed a lot of miracles, and yet his family, his fleshly brothers, still didn't put faith in him. And one of his brothers said, well, why don't you go up with us to the festival? Anyone that's, looking to make himself known does it publicly. And Jesus said, well, it's not my time. You go ahead. And then it says Jesus went up to Jerusalem to the festival secretly. Secretly. And he went into the temple secretly. He did a lot of things secretly. And I suspect Jesus is coming back secretly. That he'll be among us for a short while before the evidence is there, right? He'll be making his inspection, a walkthrough, so to speak. And then, well, the reason I say that, I mean, we have like the gospel accounts of Jesus said, when you see these things, well, those are the big things. Nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, which could be civil war. And who would doubt that the United States is on the edge of a civil war? There's no more ammo to be bought. There's an ammunition shortage. Millions and millions of people have gone out and bought guns since the last election fraud. They know what's coming. Not in terms of the kingdom, but in terms of the tyranny. But, okay, so Jesus said, nation against nation, kingdom against kingdom, food shortages, all the things. We know that. But Daniel gives us another little aspect to that. And during the time of the end, the king of the south will push. There will be a pushing against the king of the north. So during the time of the end, before the war erupts, before the king of the north floods with a storm of troops and destroys basically civilization. So that initial pushing before it becomes apparent, the time of the end begins. Jesus is ruling. He is among us in some sense, secretly, invisibly, but in a different sense than he has been prior. Right? Jesus said, I will be with you all the days until the conclusion of the system of things. Then something different happens. By the way, the conclusion of the system is the same thing as the time of the end. The Greek Septuagint, which was the first translation of the Hebrew, that expression "time of the end" is used, half a dozen times in Daniel, and the Septuagint uses the word centelia, which is the word that the Greek writers of the gospel used. Centelia. Tell us, when will these things be, and what will be the sign of your presence? And the centelia. So, if the pushing has not begun, that means we're not in the time of the end. And we need to see something, I think, dramatic, a big, big pushback. Maybe it won't come from Donald Trump. He's got a week left. I don't know. It's not looking too good for him. But some have suggested he may have already signed the Insurrection Act. If that's the case, even if they impeach him, the law is already enacted. So there's some high-stakes stuff going on now. And, well, that's why I've chosen as a theme for this broadcast to be sound in mind, to be vigilant with a view to prayer. And why? Because the end of all things has drawn close. Well, some may say, well, that was written 2,000 years ago, and the Watchtower has been saying the end is drawn close for all of its existence. And that's true, my friends. But the Word of God is alive, is it not? And at some point, those words, the end of all things has drawn close, will ring with, how should we say, clarity. Yes, so the end of all things has drawn close. It's pretty apparent to me. But anyway, on my previous podcast, I would like to take questions. So, as I say, I'm dedicating myself to regular podcasts. So this is an opportunity for you to formulate some questions and, lubricate my machinery, right? Iron sharpens iron. So I feed off of your questions. A longtime reader and a friend of mine that I communicate with, at the Daily Text a few days ago, he made a comment about, hiding your Bible and your precious Bible literature. Find a nice, secure hiding place in case the authorities come. The Watchtower was saying, to do this in places where you're under ban. And of course, it'll be coming here. We can see the tyranny. I mean, they're going after Trump supporters now. Think of that. You voted for this guy and you question the election results, and now you are somehow breaking law. You are an enemy of the state. Listen, if they get rid of America, and they're going to, as far as the Constitution and those protections, guess who they're coming after next? I don't have to tell you, do I? But anyway, that was the Watchtower's comment that elicited my friend's question here. He says, don't you think it's a bit odd to instruct Christians or Jehovah's Witnesses to hide their Bibles? Jesus said, deny me and I will deny you. Hiding a Bible in your house, especially if they are really looking for it, just seems pointless. I mean, how does that scenario play out? Your home gets raided. Why? Because they think you're a JW or a Christian and they want to find evidence. But what happens if they just ask you, hey, do you profess to be a JW Christian? If you hide the Bible, aren't you forced to say, no, I'm not one? Doing so, you just denied Christ. If you say yes, then they don't need the Bible. I love his reasoning here, and I appreciate it. I never really thought of it. But I agree with you, my friend. He said, it just seems weird to me. I'd rather just leave it all laying out around so they don't tear up my house and the floors and walls. He goes, I've got a good memory. I know how to pray and will remain in the faith. Hell, ancient Job stayed faithful, didn't he? And he didn't even have a Bible. Oh, what do you say? Well, I don't think I need to say anything. I did mention that Jesus, he hid from his persecutors in the temple. It wasn't his time to be arrested. Elijah hid from the crazed Jezebel when she was out to kill him. But, Jehovah empowered him to stand in front of them all, in front of the prophets of Baal, and called down fire from heaven. So Jehovah empowered him. Yeah, it's a really good question. Now that everything's, computerized, I mean, the authorities would know. I mean, everybody in the Western world is going to have a smartphone or a tablet. I mean, a lot of us have, all kinds of these devices around. I've got a smartphone. I rarely use it, but I've got a tablet. And, of course, I've got a MacBook, and I've got a Big Mac desktop. You're going to hide your desktop? If the authorities come in, you're going to lug him, a big tower. Where are you going to put all that junk? And if they come into your home and see that you are not wired to the internet, they're going to know you're hiding something. And like my friend said, they're going to tear your place up. It's interesting. I remember reading something in one of the Watchtower's yearbooks. I think it was a 77 yearbook. It was all about what went down in Germany and the Nazis, of course. And there was an experience where the Gestapo came into someone's home and they had, Watchtower literature and Bibles, It's been years since I've read this, so I may be a little faulty on the details, so I'll be vague. But it was in plain sight, and they didn't see it, and they left. They didn't drag them off to the concentration camps. So they felt for sure that Jehovah's angel had blinded them. And, I mean, we have to have that kind of faith. We don't want to be cowering in fear because the devil plays upon our fears. He's going to try to terrorize us. And what a privilege it will be to stand up and, let our faith be known and put our trust in Jehovah and let him protect us. If we're to be arrested, so be it. Jesus was arrested. The apostles were arrested. So, yeah, we have to be careful about that. I expect the Watchtower to completely compromise and to sell us out. And we've seen hints of it. I mean, they're cutting a deal, partnership with the UN. That was pretty bad. And then we saw a member of the governing body under oath before the Australian Royal Commission. Do you believe that the governing bodies solely speak for Jehovah? No, that would be presumptuous. How many of Jehovah's Witnesses saw that and said, here is God's spokesman, supposedly, lying flat out. What did Jesus say? We put you under oath. Tell us, are you the Christ? I am, he said. So I really appreciate your question, brother. And yeah, I've got another question here. Could indebtedness, in part, be the way of receiving the mark of the beast? And he cites Proverbs 22:7. And I haven't looked that up, but I think that's where it says that the borrower is a slave of the lender. So that's a principle that applies really across the board. Individuals, corporations, and nations, as a matter of fact. Well, being in debt is, not going to compromise us in God's eyes. But when we are in need, if we are hungry, we could be forced to compromise. And that's what the indebtedness will try to provoke. I say will because this great reset that they're talking about, what was his name? Claus, whatever, this German head of this global council. He said that, with this reset, you will have nothing and you'll be happy. Well, what is that? That's communism. We'll give you everything you need, food and a place to stay, and, some work. Hitler gave him work too, didn't he, in the camps? But see, Satan wants us to compromise our faith. So by crashing the system and then installing, this whatever cryptocurrency or whatever they've got planned, where there's one central agency that controls everything. And by the way, the Federal Reserve with their zero interest rates, and they've been buying corporate bonds by the billions. Well, what happens when the interest rates go up and those companies default? The Federal Reserve, which represents this empire, the globalists, it will own the corporations. Some of them will just go by the wayside and be bankrupt, but you can believe that the corporations that provide food and the necessities of life will be under the control of this coming eighth king. So by impoverishing us and controlling all the means of life, the eighth king will try to get us to grovel and denounce our faith. Sign here, to participate in this, wonderful new world, and get your little card here you can buy and sell. And Jehovah's Witnesses need not apply, right? Yeah, so indebtedness, we're in debt now, but nothing like we're going to be when this whole thing blows up. Hey, the same question has another question. What did Jesus mean at Matthew 28:20? And, well, that's a rather vague question. Of course, that's where Jesus said, go forward and teaching them to observe all the things I've commanded you, and look, I'm with you all the days until the conclusion of the system. Well, I commented on that briefly. And this really disproves the whole invisible parousia thing, if you think about it. Jesus said, I'm with you all the days until the conclusion of the system. So from the time Jesus left the earth, that was the last thing he said. That's the last verse in Matthew. I'm with you all the days until the conclusion. So he's invisibly present. He said, where two or more gathered in my name, I am in their midst. And at the Watchtower, it talks about this invisible presence. Well, how is that different than Jesus being with us all the days until the conclusion? Now, he's with us all the days until the conclusion, and then a new phase begins. The organization is crushed, brushed aside, and then we have to look for Jehovah, really look for him, and he'll let himself be found. Jesus will reveal himself to the chosen ones. They'll see him as he is. And then the sons of God will be revealed. That's during the conclusion. And we ain't there yet. But the end of all things has drawn close, eh? Well, that is going to do it. And like I say, I'm going to do these more regularly. So if you have questions, send them to me at the watchmanspost at Gmail. And I'll put them on. I do want to mention something. I have a Patreon account, and I'm reluctant to ask for donations, and I've been covering my expenses fine, and I'm not without funds by any means. I think over the years I've probably spent six figures on my website when I consider cameras and computers. And I used to do pay-per-clicks. When I first started ewatchman.com, if someone Googled, that company is all pervasive, if someone Googled Jehovah's Witnesses, my website would come up in the top 10 search results. But something happened, and I don't know what. I'm not saying I was blacklisted or whatever, because my site does come up on, off-the-wall search terms, But anyway, it has gradually faded. And so I started using pay-per-clicks. And I used them for maybe 2 or 3 years. I spent about $1,000 a month on pay-per-clicks. And I think probably a lot of you that have been longtime listeners and readers found my site from clicking on one of my pay-per-clicks. Anyway, where was I going with this? Well, I'm intending to renew my pay-per-clicks. Because right now, Google thinks that a phone listing of a Kingdom Hall of Jehovah's Witnesses is more relevant to someone doing a search for Jehovah's Witnesses than my website, which has like over 1,000 articles, in-depth articles on Jehovah's Witnesses and the Watchtower. And for some reason, so pay-per-clicks, you bid on keywords. And a keyword like Jehovah's Witnesses, there are, some outfits that use it, like these witness-run companies that sell field service gear, paraphernalia, whatever. They use pay-per-clicks. And to have your ad come up, you have to bid on that keyword, Jehovah's Witnesses. And right now, the going price for that keyword is $3 per click. Back when I was doing it, it was a lot less than that, less than $1. But anyway, as more and more people are doing searches, and it's all a business thing anyway. But so if you would like to help me with my new pay-per-click campaign, if you make a pledge to Patreon, they take it out of your account at the beginning of every month. So if you pledge, let's say $3, think of it, you are buying a click for someone to visit my website. And they may not even be one of Jehovah's Witnesses. It may, just be somebody surfing around, whatever. But I do want to reach Jehovah's Witnesses. I think I have something to say to them. And you can help me get my little voice out there. Hey, just think, if you pledge $6, you could buy 2 clicks in a month. Get it? Okay. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about that. Thank you, and we will talk to you very soon.